Different saws are used for making different types of cuts, and some saws will only allow you to make straight cuts. The bandsaw, however, will allow you to make straight cuts as well as curved cuts. The bandsaw gets its name because it has a blade in the shape of a band that wraps around two wheels, one in the top cabinet and one in the lower cabinet. Now that we know a little bit about the blade, let's talk about some of the other parts that make up the saw. Here we have the table, which is used for supporting your workpiece as you make your cuts, and can be set up for use with a rip fence for making rip cuts, and you can also use a miter gauge for making cross cuts, but you'll mostly use the saw for making curved cuts. To the rear of the blade, you'll see the guide, which is made up of two bearings on either side of the blade, and they're used to help prevent the blade from twisting as you make cuts, and they also are there to help prevent the blade from coming off of the wheels. Extending down in front of the blade is the guard, which helps conceal the blade and helps prevent you from accidentally getting cut if you come in contact with the blade. To the right of the blade is the light, which can be turned on to light up your workspace, and is controlled by this switch here, and should not be confused with the switch below it, which engages the saw by pulling up on the switch like you see here. Now that we know a little bit about the saw and the different parts that make up the saw, let's talk about some safety concerns you'll need to know for using the saw. The bandsaw is generally considered to be a safer saw than others because it doesn't have the risk of kickback. But in order to make sure you're using the saw safely, you'll want to make sure that you're wearing safety glasses and considering some other things like how far should you have your fingers away from the blade. That should be between 2 and 4 inches. And what does that mean exactly? It means ideally you'd want to have your fingers at least 4 inches away from the blade, but if you had to, you could get them as close as 2. Also, you'll want to make sure that you don't have your hand at any time in line with the blade, because if you accidentally slip, you'll end up cutting yourself. Also, prior to making any curved cuts, make sure that you make relief cuts so that you won't end up having to back out of a curved cut, which could cause the blade to come off of the wheels, and that is a dangerous situation. Also, as you make your cuts, a lot of times you accumulate a lot of different small pieces gathered around the blade. To remove those pieces, you'll want to either make sure you use a pencil or some other scrap piece of wood so you don't accidentally end up coming in contact with the blade. And if you follow these safety concerns while using the saw, you'll end up making safe cuts. Now let's talk about what you'll need to do to prepare to make a curved cut. When making a curved cut, the blade will need to travel along the radius of the curve. Right now the saw is set up with a 3/8 inch blade, which will allow you to make a curve that has a radius that's about as tight as 2 inches. Any curve that has a tighter radius than 2 inches, and you'll need to plan out and place some relief cuts on the board prior to making your curved cut. A relief cut is a straight cut in and a straight cut out that lead up to your actual cut line. It's okay to back out of a straight cut, just not a curved cut. So you end up placing several of these relief cuts. These are straight lines that lead up to your cut line and are placed out according to how tight the curves are that are on your board. The tighter the curves, the closer your relief cuts will be, and the wider the curves, the further spaced they are, the relief cuts will be placed. And if you're not sure about how far to space your relief cuts out, see me and I'll make sure that you're set up with the proper spacing on relief cuts. Once you've had your relief cuts placed on the board properly, you'll be ready to make your cut. To start using the saw, you're first going to want to turn on the light and shine it in the area around the blade. Take a close look and make sure that nothing is going to obstruct you from making your cut. Once you've done that, go ahead and turn on the saw and let the blade get up to full speed. Grab your board with both hands and position your hands so that they're in a safe place. Lay the board flat on the table and then begin to move the board up to the blade, remembering to align the blade on the scrap portion of your board. Start maneuvering the board through the blade, remembering to save a small amount of room for sanding later on. As you continue to make your cut, if the blade starts to bind on the wood, remember if it's a curved cut, you'll need to shut the saw first before backing out of the cut. Otherwise, you'll continue on making a clean cut. And here's what it'll look like to make a cut on the bandsaw.